It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. This famous opening line sets the stage for our exploration into the captivating world of Pride and Prejudice, a timeless novel that remains as relevant today as it was over 200 years ago. In this world, we find a society obsessed with marriage, wealth, and social status. It is a society where a good match is considered a triumph and an imprudent one a disaster. This is the world of Jane Austen, a world she knew intimately and one she portrays with a blend of satire, humor, and keen observation. Jane Austen, the seventh child of a country parson, was born in the late 18th century, a time when England was undergoing significant social and economic changes. The Industrial Revolution was transforming the country's economy, creating a new class of wealthy individuals who were not born into aristocracy, but had earned their fortunes through trade or industry. This upheaval is reflected in Pride and Prejudice, where characters like Mr. Darcy, who is rich but not of noble birth, are central to the plot. The opening line of Pride and Prejudice is more than just a clever sentence. It encapsulates the novel's central theme, the marriage market, and how it is influenced by wealth and social status. The single man in possession of a good fortune is Mr. Darcy, and the wife he is supposedly in want of becomes Elizabeth Bennet, our spirited protagonist. Their story, along with the stories of their families and friends, unfolds against a backdrop of balls, dinners, and country walks, providing a fascinating insight into 19th century English society. Jane Austen's sharp wit and keen social commentary, her understanding of human nature, and her skill in creating complex, believable characters have ensured that Pride and Prejudice remains one of the most loved novels in English literature. Thus begins our journey into the intricate tapestry of 19th century English society, as woven by Jane Austen. Let us embark together on the journey of the Bennet family, starting with chapters 1 to 10. We begin our tale in the quaint English countryside, in the estate of Longbourn, home to the Bennet family. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, our first introductions, are parents to 5 unmarried daughters, a circumstance that causes Mrs. Bennet no small amount of distress. She, a woman of little wit and much anxiety, is consumed by the singular goal of marrying off her daughters to wealthy suitors. Mr. Bennet, on the other hand, is of a more satirical disposition, finding amusement in the follies and absurdities of those around him, including his wife. Enter Mr. Bingley, a wealthy, affable young bachelor newly arrived in town, who sends the neighborhood, and particularly Mrs. Bennet, into quite the frenzy. With an income of $5,000 a year, he is seen as the perfect suitor for one of the Bennet daughters. Mr. Bingley, however, is not alone. He is accompanied by his 2 sisters and his even wealthier, though less sociable friend, Mr. Darcy. Our first real event of note is the public ball at Meryton, where we see these characters interact for the first time. Mr. Bingley, true to form, is amiable and well-liked. He dances with many of the young women, but is particularly taken with Jane, the eldest and most beautiful of the Bennet sisters. They share 2 dances, sparking the beginning of a special connection. In stark contrast, Mr. Darcy presents himself as proud and aloof, refusing to dance with anyone outside of his own party. He even goes so far as to slight Elizabeth, the second eldest Bennet sister, stating she is tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt him. This comment, overheard by Elizabeth, sows the seeds of her prejudice against Darcy, making her believe him to be the proudest, most disagreeable man. As the chapters progress, we see a budding relationship between Jane and Mr. Bingley, much to Mrs. Bennet's delight. Letters are exchanged, visits are made, and the 2 seem to be growing quite fond of each other. Elizabeth, or Lizzie as she is often called, is happy for her sister, but remains wary of the Bingley sisters, who she finds to be proud and unkind. Meanwhile, the Bennet family is visited by Mr. Collins, a pompous and pedantic clergyman who is to inherit Mr. Bennet's property due to the laws of entailment. He expresses a desire to marry one of the Bennet sisters to make amends for the entailment. His sights are initially set on Jane, but upon hearing she may soon be engaged, he promptly shifts his attention to Elizabeth. The final event in our first 10 chapters is the ball at Netherfield, hosted by Mr. Bingley. The evening is filled with dancing, dining, and a fair share of drama. Jane and Bingley's affection for each other is clear, but the Bingley sisters and Mr. Darcy seem less than thrilled. Elizabeth spends much of the evening avoiding Mr. Collins and his proposal, and ends up dancing with Mr. Darcy, a surprising turn of events that sets the stage for their complex relationship in the chapters to come. From these initial chapters, we are introduced to a world of societal expectations, romantic aspirations, and character contrasts. Jane's sweetness is juxtaposed with Elizabeth's wit, Bingley's amiability contrasts with Darcy's pride, and the absurdity of Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Collins is offset by the satirical humor of Mr. Bennet. And so the stage is set, the characters are in place, and the drama begins to unfold. As we continue our journey through Pride and Prejudice, we turn our attention to chapters 11 to 20. Let's dive right into the heart of the story, where the intricate details of the plot begin to unravel. The chapters we are delving into are filled with pivotal moments that further the development of our beloved characters, particularly Elizabeth Bennet and the rather aloof, yet intriguing Mr. Darcy. Chapter 11 takes us to the home of Mr. Darcy's aunt, Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Here, Elizabeth's sharp wit and refusal to be intimidated by Lady Catherine's overbearing nature serve to intrigue Mr. Darcy further. He begins to see her as a woman of substance, far removed from the superficiality of the society he's accustomed to. But the plot thickens with the entry of a new character in Chapter 12, the handsome and seemingly charming Mr. Wickham. His introduction into the narrative brings a twist, as he shares a story of alleged mistreatment at the hands of Mr. Darcy, painting a rather unsavory picture of our male protagonist. Elizabeth, already not overly fond of Mr. Darcy, is all too quick to believe this tale, fueling her prejudice against him. As we advance to Chapter 13, the Bennet family receives a visit from Mr. Collins, the man set to inherit their property. His arrival brings to light the importance of social status and marriage in the society of the time. His pompous nature and his pursuit of marriage for the sake of securing his status rather than for love provides a stark contrast to Elizabeth's belief in marrying for love. In chapters 14 and 15, we see Mr. Wickham's influence growing on Elizabeth. She finds his charm and his tales about Mr. Darcy captivating. However, Mr. Darcy's growing affection for Elizabeth causes him to warn her subtly about Wickham's character, although his advice falls on deaf ears. Chapter 16 brings a turning point in Elizabeth's relationship with Wickham and Darcy. During a conversation with Wickham, she finds that Darcy's actions towards Wickham might not have been as unjust as she initially believed. This revelation leaves her questioning her judgment of both men. The next chapters, 17 to 19, center around Mr. Collins's proposal to Elizabeth. Despite the societal expectation and her mother's insistence, Elizabeth rejects him, valuing her happiness over social status. Her decision underlines her strong-willed character and her belief in love and compatibility in marriage. In Chapter 20, we witness a significant moment in Elizabeth's relationship with Mr. Darcy. He begins to acknowledge his feelings for her openly, and despite his belief in his superiority and her lower social status, he can't help but be drawn to her vivacity and wit. Throughout these chapters, we see the importance of social status, the misconceptions that can arise from Pride and Prejudice, and the evolution of Elizabeth's relationships with Mr. Darcy and Mr. Wickham. These chapters delve into the complexities of societal norms and personal feelings, painting a vivid picture of the struggles faced by our protagonists. In the midst of misunderstandings and misjudgments, our protagonists find themselves entangled in a web of pride and prejudice. The journey is far from over, and as we move forward, we'll continue to unravel the intricate tapestry of this timeless narrative, where love, pride, and prejudice intertwine in the most unexpected ways. So stay tuned as we delve deeper into the world of Pride and Prejudice, where every chapter is a journey of its own. In the final chapters of Pride and Prejudice, we witness the resolution of a complex narrative. We pick up where we left off, with Lydia Bennet's scandalous elopement with the rogue Mr. Wickham. The Bennets are in despair, fearing Lydia's indiscretion will ruin the family's reputation. However, unbeknownst to them, Mr. Darcy, our initially proud protagonist, steps in to save the day. He hunts down the errant couple and persuades Wickham to marry Lydia, thus preserving the Bennet family's honor. But why, you might ask, would Darcy, who once professed his abhorrence for Wickham, go to such lengths? The answer lies in his love for Elizabeth Bennet, Lydia's older sister. Darcy's actions, done in secret and without expectation of praise, starkly contrast his earlier arrogance and pride, highlighting his transformation. In the meantime, Elizabeth's feelings towards Darcy begin to shift. The more she learns of his true character, the more her prejudice against him wanes. The revelation of Darcy's selfless act is the tipping point. Elizabeth realizes the depth of Darcy's love for her and recognizes her own feelings for him. Then we have the return of Mr. Collins, who has, in his typically pompous style, written a letter to Mr. Bennet. He advises him to disown Lydia, showing us once again his lack of empathy and understanding. On the other hand, Jane Bennet, the eldest and most serene of the Bennet sisters, finally gets her happy ending with the affable Mr. Bingley, a union that brings joy to both parties. And now let's turn to the crux of our narrative, the love story between Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy. After a series of misunderstandings and heartache, Darcy proposes to Elizabeth for the second time. This time, however, Elizabeth accepts, having come to love Darcy for his true self. Their union signifies the triumph of love over pride and prejudice. But what about the other characters? Mr. Bennet, initially indifferent to his daughter's futures, learns the importance of responsible parenting, while Mrs. Bennet, ever the social climber, finally gets her wish of seeing her daughters well married. The frivolous Lydia, despite her reckless behavior, gets a reality check when she realizes her marriage to Wickham is far from the romantic adventure she'd envisioned. Each character's journey in these final chapters provides valuable insights. The novel demonstrates that first impressions can often be misleading, and it's only through understanding and empathy that true love can blossom. Furthermore, Austen uses her characters to critique the societal norms of her time. She highlights the importance of marrying for love, not for social standing or wealth. She also emphasizes the importance of personal growth and self-improvement, as seen through the character arcs of both Darcy and Elizabeth. In the end, Pride and Prejudice isn't just a love story. It's a tale of personal growth, societal critique, and the triumph of love over societal norms. It's about how individuals can change, grow, and learn to understand each other beyond initial judgments. It's about how love can conquer all, even in the face of societal pressures and personal misjudgments. And so in the midst of societal pressures and personal misjudgments, love prevails. Pride and Prejudice is not merely a love story. It is a social commentary, a critique, and a timeless classic. This statement echoes the core themes we've unwrapped throughout this video, themes that not only define the world of Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, but resonate to this day. At its heart, Pride and Prejudice is an exploration of marriage. Jane Austen scrutinizes the institution, dissecting its various forms and motivations. Marriage, to Austen, is not just about love. It's a complex tapestry woven with threads of financial stability, social standing, and personal growth. We see this in the contrasting unions of Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, Charlotte and Mr. Collins, and of course, Elizabeth and Darcy. Wealth and social status are another key theme. They shape the characters' choices, their interactions, and indeed their very identities. Austen uses the stark contrast between the Bennets' beneath modest means and Darcy's extravagant wealth to show how these factors can influence perceptions and relationships. Yet, she also underscores that wealth and status do not define character or guarantee happiness. The role of women in society is another theme Austen insightfully explores. She challenges the conventions of her time, presenting us with strong, intelligent women who are not afraid to speak their minds. Elizabeth Bennet, with her sharp wit and independent spirit, stands out as an early feminist icon, her character defying the restrictive norms of her era. And then, there is Pride and Prejudice. Austen masterfully shows how these two traits can cloud judgment, create misunderstandings, and hinder happiness. But she also shows us how they can be overcome, how understanding and love can wipe away the fog of prejudice and the sheen of pride. So, what makes Pride and Prejudice such an enduring classic? Perhaps it's the way Austen's themes transcend time, remaining relevant and relatable. Or maybe it's her unforgettable characters, with their strengths, flaws, and growth. Or it could be her wit and wisdom, her keen observations, and her beautifully crafted prose. Likely it's a combination of all these elements, a literary alchemy that makes Pride and Prejudice as fresh and appealing today as it was over 2 centuries ago. In the words of its creator, "I declare after all there is no enjoyment like reading. How much sooner one tires of anything than of a book." Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice is a testament to this belief, a book that continues to captivate, charm, and challenge us. And so, we close this chapter, this exploration of Pride and Prejudice. But the journey continues. For each time we open a book, we embark on a new adventure. Until our next literary journey, fare thee well.